Hi, it's Eileen from Through the Garden Gate again, and it's been a really cold couple of weeks here where I'm at. I thought I'd jump on today and just share a few of my go-to resources for gardening here in my Zone 5B garden up in Northeast Illinois. There's not a lot I can do out in the garden this time of year, so I'm getting a little itchy, but a few things that I've got going on so far is that I've started ordering some seeds. I've got some of my native plant seeds already cold stratifying in the refrigerator. I've got some winter sowing already done outside. And today I'm going to share with you just some of my resources, a couple of my favorite garden tools, and yeah, we'll just go ahead and get going here. So I've got a few books I want to start with. So related to my vegetable gardening, we'll start with the vegetable gardening. One of my favorites, Lasagna Gardening. I hope this is showing up okay. By Patricia Lanza. It's a really great book. It's all about how to create garden beds really easily. I use this technique mostly for my vegetable gardens, for my native plant beds, because native plants are adapted to our conditions here and everything. They don't need super rich soil, but this is a really great method for creating a vegetable garden bed that's going to have some really good, rich, well-drained soil for you. And when I first heard people talking about lasagna gardening, well over 25 years ago, I'm sure it's been around a lot longer, but in my mind I was like, well, do you grow like tomatoes and basil? Is it, for stuff to make a lasagna? But no, it's an idea of layering to create a garden bed. And so basically it's like building a little mini compost pile in place, but as all the materials break down, you get really good rich organic soil, you get really well-drained soil. And you can use it in a raised bed. I do that a lot if I have a raised bed, or you could just start it right on the ground. And you start with, placing wet cardboard over the area, or if you've built a raised bed, you put the cardboard in the bottom, and then you just layer things like small sticks and twigs or straw. And then you put a layer of greens. So it's just like building a compost pile. So that could be grass clippings that haven't been treated with any kind of chemicals. It could be the vegetable and fruit peelings from your kitchen. And you just keep making those layers. When I'm doing this, I try to build it in the late summer, early fall, or into the fall, and then I let it sit over the winter, and I can plant it in the spring. If you're doing something like you want to put carrot seeds or something really fine like that in it, I would probably put a couple inches of some kind of finer compost or soil on top, just so your seeds have a little bit of a place to go. Because when you're building these with bigger plant materials like, dead leaves and grass clippings and things, those little tiny seeds don't really have much anywhere to go. But it's really great, especially for growing like peppers or tomatoes or broccoli, and you start those things inside and you have a little plug to put in the ground in the spring. You just pop it right in and it does great. And then I just continue the principle behind lasagna gardening in my raised vegetable beds throughout the year. So every time I mow the grass, I don't use any kind of fertilizers or weed killer or anything like that on my lawn. So I just throw a layer of grass clippings on. And then, as we get into the fall, I'll start throwing in leaves along with the grass clippings. And then when I put the garden to bed in the fall, I just lay, the leaves from my trees on top. And what happens over time is you just continually are rebuilding soil and adding good nutrients into the garden. So that's a really good favorite. Again, Lasagna Gardening, Patricia Lanza. All right, what else do we have here? Couple of other ones that really have influenced my gardening philosophy over the last, say, 5 to 10 years or so. One is called Plant, Grow, Harvest, Repeat. And it's a really great accessible read for how to maximize the amount of food you can grow through the gardening season. For me here in 5B, I can usually get, maybe some lettuce started late April if I'm being very daring. And then lately I've been able to stretch things into almost Thanksgiving. I harvested my last batch of carrots around Thanksgiving. And I think I did my last batch of lettuce at that point too, but that varies a little bit here where I'm at. I do put, like floating row covers over my beds if we're gonna get a light frost, but we didn't get a big heavy freeze until around Thanksgiving here, and then we just got dumped on with snow. But this is a really, really great book, and talks about a lot of different topics like no-till gardening, for building good, healthy soil, really teaching you how to plan out your garden so that you can have something that even if it's just fresh herbs at the beginning, or maybe it's chives or spring onions, that first little, you get those cold crops in all the way through. So this is a great one too. Again, Plant, Grow, Harvest, Repeat by Meg McAndrews Cowden, Cowden. All right, so that's a great one. Another one that really shifted my thinking on gardening and what I could do in my yard, not just with my vegetable gardening, but with all the other beds that I have, is called Grow Now. I'm trying to read backwards here. Go beyond organic, rewild your land, sequester carbon, and support biodiversity. So it's a really good look at how what we do in our yards really can make a difference to a lot of different environmental issues we are facing. And it talks a lot about using native plants. It talks about vegetables. It talks about regenerative gardening practices, which are drawn from larger scale regenerative agriculture practices. So, looking at what those guiding principles are of nourishing the soil, managing stormwater, and controlling erosion, having a diversity of plants in your yard, and how you can take those concepts from a larger scale agricultural practices and scale them down to what you can do in your yard. And I think that those are the three that I really go to for my vegetable gardening or just general gardening stuff. As you'll notice as we get into the warmer parts of the year and I can take you out on garden walks with me, one of the reasons I garden is just not only for the food that I can grow for my family, which, trust me, I'm not grown enough to sustain us all year long, but it's just great to have that fresh food. But I really think consciously about what I'm doing in my yard and how that can have a positive impact on the overall ecology of my area. And one of the big things I really have honed in on are insects. And this book here, Attracting Beneficial Bugs to Your Garden by Jessica Walliser, is a really great book. It helps to, maybe get you to reframe a little bit your idea of insects and the role that they play. And it really is a fascinating, but again, accessible to a non-scientist information about insects, the different jobs they do on our planet and why they're so important. Trust me, I don't like mosquitoes any more than anybody else, or ticks or that sort of thing, but I do recognize that insects are really important. They do a lot of what we call ecosystem services. They pollinate, they're decomposers. They're a crucial part of the food web to help, move food through our ecosystems and energy through our ecosystems. And this is a really great read with a lot of really good scientific information about research that's done that's just fascinating about the relationship between plants and insects, especially those beneficial predator insects that go after the things like aphids or other pests in your garden, and some really great tips on how to encourage those beneficial insects so you don't need to use a bunch of chemicals to control insect problems in your garden. Kind of branching out a little bit from maybe more traditional gardening practices, I try in my ornamental beds, I guess my non-food production gardening, I pretty exclusively, not totally, but pretty much, I'd say a good 95% of what I put in my yard is going to be a native plant to my region. So a few books that helped me quite a bit. and just getting to know what kind of plants would do well here. I'm in Zone 5B in Northeast Illinois, so the Midwest Native Plant Primer is a really great book for attracting pollinators, supporting wildlife, and reducing your overall maintenance in your garden. And Alan Branhagen, Branhagen, is the author. And again, it's a really great way to learn about native plants in your area if you're in the Midwest. So it gives you species accounts, pretty pictures, and it's not super text heavy. Really great resource. So highly recommend that one. And generally speaking, using native plants can sometimes be a little controversial, or maybe not controversial. I feel like it's become much more widespread and accepted in the last 5 to 10 years, which is fantastic because it's really just such a great way to landscape. And one of the biggest concerns or holdbacks that a lot of people have is that they think their garden's going to look messy. And you don't have to have a messy garden to use native plants, or I guess a different way to say that is, when you use native plants, it doesn't necessarily mean your garden's going to be messy. You can use native plants in the same manicured, formal way that plants are used from all over the world. The big exception is when those plants are brought from different ecosystems and habitats from all over the world, sometimes they can really cause harm in our natural areas. Oftentimes they don't support our native wildlife because the wildlife and those plants didn't co-evolve with each other. But they also take a lot of resources. They take a lot of water. They can be real finicky to try and grow. So another reason to use native plants. They're adapted to your local climate, different seasonality, and they've co-evolved with the native wildlife, so they have defenses against things. And once you get them established, they're pretty easy to keep going. You don't need to water them in the summer during drought periods, that sort of thing. And there are a lot of resources out in the world about how to integrate native plants in your home landscape in a way that will be visually pleasing to you and your neighbors. And one of the books that I really like that has helped me and really helped me think about how to design the different garden beds in my yard is The Living Landscape by Rick Drake and Doug Tallamy. And if you're familiar with Doug Tallamy at all, Dr. Tallamy is a staunch advocate. He's an entomologist by training, and he's done a lot of research. He works, I believe it's University of Delaware, and he also is a part of a really powerful movement called the Homegrown National Park, which I highly recommend you looking into if you're interested at all. But I really like The Living Landscape because it talks a lot about garden design, but by using native plants. So the subtitle is Designing for Beauty and Biodiversity in the Home Garden. So the two don't have to be mutually exclusive. You can create a really beautiful space for you. Your neighbors will think it's lovely to look at, but it's also going to be really great at supporting local wildlife and native plants. And just because I'm a geek about all things plants and animals, I'm constantly trying to learn and understand the various forms of life that live in my garden. And so one of my resources for learning about the little critters that are visiting the garden is called Pollinators of Native Plants, and it's by Heather Holm, who also has great resources, other books as well. I believe she's got one on bees and wasps. And then also, if you go to her, if you just do an internet search of her name and the words soft landings, there's a whole website dedicated to a concept of creating native garden beds under native trees like oaks and hickories, walnuts. Yes, things can grow under black walnut trees. But the idea is to create a soft landing for various critters who may be up in the trees for part of their life cycle, but have to spend part of their life cycle down on the ground or even underground. So those are some of the books that I really are kind of at my fingertips, and I'll go to. They're good reads. Heather's books I really like. They're, again, very accessible to the non-scientist. So great pictures, snippets of information, talks about the pollinators and the relationship that they have with the native plants. Okay, so those are my books. And just a couple things that I really, again, help me stay organized. I have a couple of different kinds, you know, everybody's got a place to store their seeds. So I'm gonna see if I can get you guys down here. Oh, no. So this is one of my seed containers. I think it's an old cigar box I found at a thrift store. I just love it. And I've got all my seeds in here. I'm going to freely admit I'm not the most organized, but before I do order seeds for the upcoming growing season, I do go in here and I check to see what I already have. I'll usually keep seed packets. Like I said, my vegetable garden's not huge. I don't go through a ton of seeds every year. So, you know, I may have an open seed. Which one am I here? So one of my tomato seed packets from last year, it was the Amish paste. I get it from Seed Savers Exchange. You can see I've torn it open, but I only have room for about, I don't know, 8 tomato plants in my garden. And I like to do a few different varieties. And so I still have a few seeds left from last year. So I'll probably plant these up. I usually don't keep them much more than 2 years. I have tried, a couple of years ago, I had so many tomato seeds from different varieties left over that I just planted all of them. I think it was 45 tomato plants. There's no way, no way I can fit 45 tomato plants in my garden. But I just wanted to see, you know, how many of them would germinate, because some of the seed packets were 3, 4, 5 years old. And I almost got, I'd say I got pretty good germination. Easily 85% of those seeds germinated, which is great, you know, and I try to store them in a cool, dry place. These seed boxes help, these seed containers. So like last year, planted some zucchini, you know, you only need one plant, and so I still have some seeds. Now, I won't plant anything in the zucchini, squash, melon, cucumber. I won't plant any of those in my garden this year because I went a little overboard last year, and I did notice that I got a few squash bugs. And so this year I'm just taking a break. I'm not going to plant any of them. Hopefully I'll break that cycle without having to use chemicals. So, and just a little run through of the seeds I have already ordered this year and received. I got a few more orders on the way. So I ordered, that was from before, the celery was from another year. I grow a lot of beans, green beans. And I try to do them, you know, a succession planting kind of thing. So I'm getting beans usually in mid-July. And if I do it right, I'll have beans through mid-September, maybe late September. Once I get there, the days get too short and not staying warm enough usually. So this year I'm trying jade beans. I've never tried those before, but a few folks that I follow on YouTube that are gardeners have recommended jade, so I'm going to try jade beans this year, and that's a green snap bean. What else did I get? I think I got, this year I'm trying to grow leeks and onions from seed. So in the past I've gotten either the little sets, which look like tiny little onion bulbs, or I've gotten the starts, which are, you know, basically got the green stalk and a tiny little bulb. But I'm going to start them early this year. I'm going to start them in March, like the very beginning of March, and try and grow the leeks and onions totally from seed and see how that goes in the garden. So that'll be fun to see how that goes. And then my other order is all my lettuce. I usually plant out all my lettuce seed every year because I do several crops. I'll do one early in the season, and then I do one towards the end, like once we get into the end of August, it's not quite as awful hot, and that sometimes I'll plant even one mid-September. And then, like I said, I just use floating row covers to try and keep everything protected through those first initial frosts that we have. And then, so those are some of my seeds in my little seed containers. I have 2 actually. This is a fun one. I really like this one. So I can see through the top. Again, so many tomato seeds. I do share seeds with friends who also garden. A couple years, I've got a friend who she said, oh, I forgot, especially during the pandemic. She totally forgot to get her seeds ordered, and then she couldn't get any because everybody was gardening. So I was like, well, I've got some different things. So yeah, so we've got cabbage. I might do cabbage this year. I tried cabbage last year. I don't do well with cabbage. I can grow broccoli really well, not so great with cabbage. I think it gets too hot here too quickly, or at least that's been happening. I feel like our summers have gone, or our seasons have gone from a really cold, wet spring where I feel it takes a long time for me to be able to get anything out in the garden. And then all of a sudden, like that, we're in the upper 80s or 90s in June, and then it stays that way. So it's a little tricky for me to get cabbage. I want to share my absolute go-to garden tool. I'm a little embarrassed to show it to you because I obviously did not clean it after the last time I used it. I just went out in the garage to dig out some things, and it's about 10 degrees outside Fahrenheit right now. So, but this little, I can't remember the name of it. Is it a Japanese hoe or something like that? Mine's a little beat up. I do need to clean it and sharpen it this spring, but it's got a bit of a sharp edge here. I'm a lefty, so the way the blade is here, it fits really nicely in my hand, and you can get them, they have them made for right-handed people too. But this is my go-to, especially for weeding in between plants with like smaller weeds that I can just take this and I just run it just a little bit under the surface of the soil, and it just gets all those weeds in and the roots really quickly. And then I just, they mix in with the soil. So it's a real great surface loosener, I guess is a way to think about it. I really love it. It's also really good. I have stone walkways, and in the gaps between the stones, sometimes I can get weeds that I don't want. And so I'll just go out there with this, and I can use the pointed end. I just beat this thing up every year, but it's great. And it fits my hand really nicely. It's super light. And the only thing I should probably do, because I've misplaced it a couple of times, is I might paint the handle like a bright orange or something so I can find it. Let's see, what else do we have here? Probably like the rest of you, the kneeling pad. I would be lost without my kneeling pad. This thing goes everywhere with me. I think I have about 4 of them because I inevitably, like most of you, working in the garden, doing something. The kids come home from school, or I got to go check on dinner, or I got to go do something. So I tend to just drop and leave it. And then the next time where is it? So I've got several kneeling pads as well. A couple other things that I couldn't find them, but I'll try and throw pictures up of what I'm talking about. Gardening gloves. I go through gardening gloves like you wouldn't believe. I've got a pair now that I really like, and it's like a 3/4 sleeve garden glove. So it comes up all the way over my forearm. Sun protection is really important. I grab my garden hat too. I got a big floppy garden hat, long sleeves. So I try to, in the summertime, it not only helps with sun protection, but keeps the bugs off of me. I tend to do most of my gardening in the summer, early in the morning. We were just talking at work yesterday how sunsets was right exactly at 5 p.m. where I live yesterday. And it just struck me as, wow, that's very precise, 5 p.m. And we were just talking about, we're in the midst of winter, but the days are getting a little bit longer, and we're dreaming about spring. And I was thinking back to my summer garden days where I'm in the garden and there's enough light for me to be working in the garden at 5:30 in the morning. Now, that's great because it's not as hot, but there could be some bugs out at that point. So I like lightweight long sleeves, those garden gloves that go all the way up and just protect me. I've got these other more tight-fitting sleeves I can pull on my arms, and that helps protect against, rough plants or scratches, but also sun. And then my gardening shoes just sometimes just tend to be whatever I'm wearing. But I do have a few different boots and things that I like to use there. And I think that's about it for all the garden stuff, the tools and things. As I get into doing some seed starting, we'll have another video coming up soon. I'm going to be cold stratifying a few more native seeds in the next couple of days. They need to go into the refrigerator at the beginning of February so that they're ready to plant out at the beginning of March. And then I'll be planting those onions and leeks at the beginning of March. I might start the broccoli and peppers then too. I feel like when I grow green peppers from seed, it always takes forever. I'm gonna delay my tomatoes just a little bit this year. The last couple years I start them at the beginning of April, and if I can't get them out, I feel like they do really well, and they get super tall and really big in my home inside growing environment, and it's just a little bit trickier to keep them going while I'm waiting for the temperatures to cooperate and get them outside. So we'll see how all that goes as we move along. But I hope that you enjoyed seeing a few of the resources that I like, that are important for me, help me in my gardening. As I think of things when I'm doing other videos and we're doing other projects, I'll definitely share it. If you like what I'm doing, please hit that thumbs up, like button, leave a comment, let me know what your favorite tool is. Subscribe. I'm trying to get better about getting videos out more frequently, and definitely as we get into the spring and summer, there'll be plenty of content for me. In the meantime, stay warm, be safe, and start planning your summer garden. I look forward to hearing from all of you.